We are now starting our third theme of the day, enterprise agility, resilience in an unpredictable world. With sessions on enterprise agility, the last reorganization, and a panel on enabling business agility through company-wide transformation.
Welcome to Enterprise Agility, the last reorganization. My name's Ola Chowning, and I'm a partner with ISG. Thanks for joining me today. So let's start out with a really core concept. What exactly is enterprise agility? Enterprise agility is the ability to quickly respond to the market or to your customers as an organization. So enterprises who are receiving feedback from the marketplace, which could be from the industry at large, from their supply chain, from their competitors, or that are receiving feedback from their customers. Those are organizations that are really trying to respond to that feedback, respond to those needs and those demands with a high level of velocity. So they're trying to move really quickly. We're also seeing where enterprises that are highly mature on the agility scale would recognize that not everything within their organization needs to respond or be prepared to respond with that high rate of speed. And what does that mean? Well, what it means is that there are some capabilities within a business that are relatively stable. They don't change a lot. They're not maybe market facing, or they're not a market differentiator, or they're very mature. And so therefore they're not changing a lot. I need them to be very efficient, and I need them to be really stable. Where there are other places within my organization that are very dynamic, maybe they're market facing, maybe they're a competitive differentiator for me. And so enterprise agility is about being nimble and quick and responding to market conditions, but it's also recognizing that not everything within my organization needs the same level of agility and quickness. There are some core tenets to enterprise agility as well, and organizations that we see really highly agile in how they operate, more than anything else, put customers at the center of everything that they do. And that means that the customer is at the center of decisions they're making about investments, decisions they're making about feature functionality they want to bring to market. They're going to respond far more rapidly to what's happening in their customer base than they might be with what's happening in the industry at large. Most of them are using smaller, very cross-functional teams. And these teams, being cross-functional, are very enabled and empowered to get the things done that need to be done in reference to their specific focus area. And so these smaller teams that have all of the things that they need actually allow the organization to achieve the work that needs to get done on behalf of the customer feedback or the market feedback that they're seeing in a far more rapid way than through traditional organizations. Open innovation and a test and learn sort of minimum viable approach is also something that we see as being really prevalent in mature organizations. And what do we mean by test and learn? Think of it this way. It's about making small, incremental changes to how you face the market or what you do for your customers, getting the feedback around that. So that's the test part. Let me make a small change, very incremental. Let me get the feedback on that and learn from the feedback before I proceed to either expand that change or maybe fall back that change. Maybe that didn't go very well from a test perspective. So it's this very iterative, small, test and learn approach that allows us to quickly respond to the market, but not make these wide sweeping changes toward the market that don't give me an opportunity to learn from what the market feedback might be around that particular change. The other thing we're seeing organizations do is manage their portfolio of investment truly in a portfolio manner, and to expect shifts very constantly. And so think of this, some organizations would call this almost a venture capital sort of approach, where I'm going to make investments in areas where business value is the primary result. And because business value is the primary result, and the business marketplace changes very rapidly, I also need to be able to very rapidly change my investment profiles, which means that I might on one day be highly interested in investing in one segment of my business, but because of competitive changes or market changes or customer conditions or feedback, I might actually want to shift some of my investment portfolio. So taking on this idea that I'm going to understand for a year out what my investment profile might look like is actually, we're starting to see organizations that are instead achieving their agility by having very incremental funding that's occurring, and that incremental funding is happening therefore in a far more rapid manner. Another one of the core tenets is this idea of thinking big but starting small. So rather like test and learn, but what this is about is recognizing that I probably do have big sweeping plans within a particular market or segment or an area of my customer base. And those big sweeping ideas, we don't want to kick those to the curb. We want to be able to ingest those big ideas, but what we want to do is actually start them out with very small incremental change. Once we do that, though, we need to be able to scale that thinking very quickly. So where I might want to make big sweeping changes in how I operate or how I go to market, I'm probably going to make those changes in a much smaller way so that I can test them with the marketplace. But once I test them and I find that there's something that maybe my customer segment does want and I'm getting good feedback, I want to be able to scale that really rapidly to be able to take advantage of it. I need to measure and track business value constantly. And what this means is instead of having a business case that might say, look, if you make this investment, I'm actually going to see this benefit or this business result, and measuring that business result only at the conclusion of that particular cost or that project. Instead, I need to be continually measuring that business value because my investments are changing over time. I do need to see that those investments are actually resulting in a continual flow of business value that's happening across those particular areas. Over all of these core tenets, what you'll notice is happening all the time is that we need to expect change. They may be small, they may be incremental, but one of the core tenets that we really see throughout all of these is that we should expect change to happen within the organization, and we should make that change easy to do. It shouldn't be hard. It should be easy because I'm expecting it to happen all the time. So what are companies doing organizationally? If we think about how companies are organized in the past, most often what we saw with traditional organizations was that they were organized around functions. So think of functions as finance, marketing, IT, delivery. Instead, what we see a lot of really mature agile organizations doing is organizing around the subjects that drive business value. So think of it as a value stream, and along that value stream, there are areas where customer value and business value are actually being delivered. And I've provided here a couple of different examples that are hopefully fairly easy to understand and recognize. One is an experience-based subject where I have an example of an airline, and airlines very often are looking at experience-based models. Experience-based models are about the customer experience. Where along the customer experience is the airline as an enterprise providing value? And where they're providing value in an airline, simplistically, are when you purchase a ticket, when you arrive at the airport, when you board a plane. These are the stages of that customer experience. If I look at my organization in an experience-based model, what I'm going to do is look at those experiences, those stages of my experience journeys, and I'm going to organize my teams. I'm going to make my decisions. I'm going to measure my business value, and I'm going to prioritize my work specific to that stage of the customer experience journey. So what that means is I have a team, a cross-functional team, so it has a lot of the functions embedded in it, and I'm going to focus on a specific stage of that customer experience. Let's take boarding a flight. If I have a team of people who are focusing all of their attention on boarding the flight to the exclusion of all of the other steps along the journey, then I can make boarding the flight my focus, which means that I can make its business value highly relevant for that subject in a very integral way. So I'm able to look at that as an experience and be able to really drive value specific to that experience. I don't have to wait on the other stages of the experience. I don't have to vie for functional capability because some other experience stage is more important than mine or has a higher priority or got there first. I have all of the capabilities I need in order to make my specific subject, boarding a flight, as efficient, effective, and providing the best value that I can to my customer. Another example would be market or customer segment based. And here I think hotels are a very good example. I've got different segments of the marketplace that look upon hotels and want to activate their business value with the hotel in very different ways. One way might be I'm really looking for the lowest cost. That as a customer is my segment. I'm really looking for the value of which hotel I can go and rent a room at the lowest possible cost. I've got other customers in a different customer segment where the customers are really looking for my ability to maybe achieve membership points that over time will allow me to have free nights. That might be my particular segment-based approach to the market. Many hotels do this today. If their business model is around the subject of market or customer segments, then what we'll see are the different segments being defined, segments or personas being defined, and then the teams are organized and they're making decisions and they're measuring their business value and they're prioritizing their work specific to that segment, which means that everything they do, and let's just say the premium team, is to make sure that the experience of the premium members of that particular market segment are the best it can possibly be. And they're going to focus on that to the exclusion of thinking about value from a pure low-cost perspective. So cross-functional teams, what do we really mean by cross-functional teams? It's the question that I get with a lot of organizations that I work with. Look, it's really about as many of the functions as you would typically see within a business capability being resident directly inside the team rather than having to leverage it and, again, vie for that capability with other teams within the organization. Commonly, they'll include things like marketing, finance, sales, delivery, technology capabilities, maybe account or customer management, all of the things that you need in order to sell to the market, be able to deliver to the market, and keep your customers happy. That's commonly what you'll see within a cross-functional team. So if you think about a team who is focused in the airline example of being able to board a flight and providing value in the boarding of flights to their customers, they're going to market their, what they do best around boarding flights. They're going to sell to customer segments around how they're going to board flights. Their finances are going to be about, how quickly maybe they board flights. All of the things that they do as a team are going to be really related to the boarding of flights, and they're not going to be as concerned with the up or downstream portions of that customer experience journey. But there's always going to be those areas within an organization where capabilities are very stable, they don't change a lot, and therefore I'll leverage them. And that's different in any organization, but these leveraged capabilities are still very important to my ability to manage my particular segment or my particular experience stage, but they're very common. And so I can leverage them, I can make them highly efficient, and I can go and, if you will, borrow them from a corporate entity. These are commonly things that don't change a lot. They're usually very mature. They're usually functionally oriented. So I like to think of things like human resources. Rarely does human resources change. It's a pretty mature process. It's usually pretty mature from a delivery perspective. It's rarely market facing, so it doesn't usually have a competitive advantage or component. It usually is not even transparent to my end customers. Therefore, it might be best within an organization to have a leveraged capability that's sort of horizontally across all of those different cross-functional teams. Those cross-functional teams are typically responsible up to the market. So whatever segment of the market, if they're in a segmented model, or whatever stage of the customer experience, they're usually the ones who are facing the market and achieving the go-to-market messaging, but they're also the ones who are achieving the feedback loops coming from the industry, the marketplace, the supply chain, as well as the customers. So when we think about shifting from a traditional organization to an agile enterprise, this often looks similar to something like this, where you have an organizational construct that is really hierarchical in nature. It's usually command and control oriented as to how it works. It usually focuses on rules, and there's really a high desire to lower my risk profile. I want to avoid mistakes and errors at all costs, and I really want to move from a position of loyalty with my employees and with my customers, and control and safety. These are the things that we see predominant within legacy or traditional organizations. In agile organizations, what we see within an organizational structure is far more of a flat hierarchy. There's not a lot of levels within most mature agile organizations. And the teams that are there are highly self-organized. So I'm not relying upon the organizational structure to dictate how I work. Instead, the organizational structure is there to help people with things like career paths. But what I'm really trying to do is allow everyone to be, or many of the people within the organization, to be more at a peer level and to be able to self-organize themselves into teams that make sense, that allow their work to be highly efficient and to get their work done with the highest velocity possible. We see visionary role models, servant leadership being far more important than traditional management styles within agile organizations. Collaboration, of course, is key. Customer value. There's a much higher tolerance for risk. Usually my rules are not as control-oriented. They're usually more, think of them as guardrails. So my governance models are a little more relaxed. I still have that trust and safety and loyalty with my employee base, but what I have now is something that's done more at eye level. And that's, again, that peer type of relationship where instead of getting my support through processes or through written policies, instead I'm actually collaborating at eye level with peers in the organization to get my work done. And finally, look, we need to recognize that change is constant. In an agile organization, they're very open-minded for change. They're very highly agile in their learning capabilities. They put learning in the hands of every employee, and employees are incented to continuously learn, and they accept personal responsibility for what they're doing. These are very different from organizational culture perspectives. Therefore, it's probably not very surprising when we look at the move to enterprise agility that some of our common challenges we see, one of the biggest challenges that we see, is organizational culture and organizational change. Culture is the unspoken rule. It's the values, it's the behaviors that are very often entrenched within organizations. And when we think about agility, the behaviors that we're looking for there are usually quite different from what may be a core culture of command and control. And so most organizations that we talk to who've gone through or are going through this agile journey, one of their biggest challenges, and therefore one of their biggest enablers if they focus on it, is recognizing that it is a culture change, it's a behavior change, and we need to actually take action to enable and incent the appropriate behaviors to change that culture at the enterprise level. Corporate policies and processes can get in the way of your ability to make decisions quickly, your ability to be rapidly respond to the marketplace, to do things in smaller increments. Sometimes our corporate policies and processes are set up in a way that are highly rigorous. They're usually very waterfall. They usually have multiple levels of control, as an example. And again, what we're looking for is something that's going to be much more around guardrails. And so that's often a common challenge as organizations try to become more agile as an enterprise. Your decision and your financial structure can also be in the way. Think about a financial structure that says that I have to have 3 levels of approval in order to spend a certain amount of funding. We're not trying to take those controls away entirely. What we are trying to do is rethink them in a way that will allow those decisions to still be made with the highest level of prudency while still allowing as many of the barriers to be lowered as possible so that we can make those decisions rapidly. So it's all about agility, flexibility, and velocity. And finally, executive sponsorship. Look, you can become more agile as an enterprise from a grassroots type of movement. You can do it from the bottom up to a point. But really, you can't go completely all the way to an agile enterprise without having that executive sponsorship and executive intent that you're going to change your corporate culture. Corporate culture is usually entrenched and kind of has to come from the top as well as up from the bottom. And so you need to be able to focus on all of those things. So finally, why is this the last reorganization? Well, if you think about the core tenet of enterprise agility, one of the things you should have sort of guessed by this point is the biggest principle here is that change will occur. It's going to occur, even in your organizational structure. Change is going to occur. It's going to be based upon what customers are needing. It's going to be based upon your business environment, what's happening in the industry, disruption that's happening from competitors, mergers and acquisitions. I mean, all of these things at the end of the day are really introducing change into the organization. And a highly agile organization is expecting that change. It's expecting it. It's having the mechanisms that make those changes easy to enable within the organization. So rather than waiting around for the next reorg that's going to happen 3 years from now, it's about these small incremental changes that are more of an evolution than a reorganization. That's some wide sweeping change that changes everybody's reporting responsibility. Instead, what we see are these evolutionary changes that are happening much more in small increments. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation today and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much for your time.